President Emmanuel Macron has announced France will end its military presence in Niger, months after a coup removed the country's democratically elected president.
Kosovo's Prime Minister accuses Serbia of terrorism after a deadly standoff between Serb gunmen and Kosovo authorities.
The first refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh have begun arriving in Armenia as thousands of ethnic Armenians flee the region that's under Azerbaijani control.
French President Emmanuel Macron announced on Sunday that France will end its military presence in Niger and pull its ambassador out of the country. This comes after the democratically elected president Mohamed Bazoum was deposed in a coup in July. Here to tell us more is international correspondent Annelise Bourges, reporting from Paris.
France is ending its military cooperation with Niger and withdrawing all its troops from the country. The announcement was made by French President Emmanuel Macron late on Sunday during an interview, during which he also said that the French ambassador to the country would be returning home. He repeatedly said that France's sole objective in the region was to fight terrorism, and that the authorities now in charge of Niger were, quote, friends of trouble. Emmanuel Macron insisting that all French presence will indeed be removed from Niger as soon as possible. Now the question is, of course, how they will do that. Authorities in Niger had announced on Saturday that they would be closing the country's airspace to all French aircraft and aircraft chartered by France. Annelise Bourges in Paris for Euronews.
A standoff between Serb gunmen and Kosovo authorities at a monastery near the border with Serbia ended on Sunday night, following a Kosovo police operation to regain control of the area. The announcement came after a chaotic day that began when a police patrol was ambushed near the village of Banjka, killing one officer and wounding another. The gunmen fled to a nearby monastery where they barricaded themselves in and traded gunfire with Kosovo police for several hours. At least 3 assailants were shot dead in the confrontation. Kosovo's Prime Minister Albin Kurti later joined hundreds of people outside a Pristina police station at a vigil for the Kosovar Albanian killed earlier in the day. Kurti called the ambush an act of terrorism and pinned the blame on the Serbian government. Meanwhile, Serbia's President Aleksandar Vučić has condemned the killing of the police officer, but remains firm in putting the blame on Kurti for persecuting Kosovo's ethnic Serbs. A man has been arrested in connection with the killing of the police officer.
Ethnic Armenian refugees from Nagorno-Karabakh have begun arriving in Armenia, fleeing the fighting after Azerbaijan launched an offensive to take control of the breakaway territory. A few dozen residents, mainly women, children and the elderly, have arrived at the reception centre set up by the Armenian government. Thousands of people were evacuated from cities and villages affected by the latest fighting and taken to a Russian peacekeepers' camp in Nagorno-Karabakh before going on to Armenia. Azerbaijan retook the area inhabited by some 120,000 ethnic Armenians last week and says it wants to reintegrate them as equal citizens.
About the armed forces, what armed forces is doing right now, and this is a close cooperation with Russian peacekeepers to conduct the demilitarization and also support civilians, those that need support.
Ethnic Armenian leaders have said they're in Russian-mediated talks with Azerbaijan to organise the withdrawal process and the handling of civilians displaced by the fighting. The Ukrainian port city of Odessa was targeted by a barrage of Russian missiles and drones early on Monday, leaving one person wounded. According to Ukraine, at least 19 Iranian-made drones, 12 caliber missiles and 2 Onyx supersonic missiles were used by Russia. Ukraine says it shot down all the drones and all but one of the calibers. One of the Onyx missiles hit a grain warehouse. In addition, some company warehouses and a private house in the suburbs of Odessa were damaged and a woman was injured. A fire broke out in a disused hotel in Odessa harbour. Ukrainian sources say the fire has now been brought under control. On Russian territory, the governor of Kursk claimed there was only damage to an administrative building and several private houses following an alleged Ukrainian drone attack. The Russian Defense Ministry, quoted by TASS, also revealed it had intercepted 8 Ukrainian drones over Kursk, Crimea and Bryansk.
Emergency workers in Libya have recovered a further 23 bodies in the flood-stricken city of Derna. 2 teams are being formed to speed up the documenting of missing individuals. The first will continue recording bodies recovered at sea, while the other will focus on retrieving bodies that were buried randomly at the beginning of the catastrophe. Heavy rains triggered deadly floods which burst 2 dams, sending a wall of water through the eastern city. Between 4,000 and 11,000 are thought to have died, with at least 40,000 displaced.
Hollywood's film and television studios and striking writers have reached a tentative agreement after days of talks. While the agreement still needs to be ratified by members of the Writers Guild of America, it marks a significant turning point in the nearly 5-month-long strike. The historic work stoppage has frozen production and paralyzed much of Hollywood. Terms of the agreement are not as yet known. Sicilian Mafia boss Matteo Messina Denaro has died in hospital in L'Aquila in central Italy. Known as the country's #1 fugitive, he was suffering from colon cancer and had been said to be in an irreversible coma just a few days before his passing. Denaro led the Cosa Nostra crime ring and spent 3 decades escaping justice. He was finally captured in January this year in Palermo at a clinic where he was receiving chemotherapy.
Since March, Scotland's waters have been gripped by an unprecedented Category 4 marine heatwave, an unusual event which has caused mass marine mortalities. For some of Scotland's salmon farms, the staggering 4-degree temperature increase has led to a heightened risk of sea lice infestations. A recent investigation uncovered alarming evidence on 5 farms where fish were observed covered in the invasive sea lice.
Marine heat waves are becoming more frequent, which creates this optimal breeding reservoir for sea lice to rampantly reproduce. And these are the things that eat the skin, the mucus, the blood of the salmon. And, you know, these can expel out into the wider environment in their millions.
Sea lice, typically found in low densities in the wild, have become a growing concern. An exacerbating factor is the increasing sea temperature.
2022 was a record-breaking year with salmon deaths doubling. This year the outlook is even grimmer. An alarming 8.9 million fish have been reported as dead on Scottish salmon farms in 2023 already.
And while salmon farming was once seen as a potential solution to helping wild stocks replenish, sea lice are now making it a problem as they're spreading from the farms to wild salmon.
Salmon farming was seen as a sort of salvation, and then of course, the complexities become more apparent. And right now, the numbers and size of wild salmon continue to drop. It's tragic.
The salmon industry says it prioritises the well-being of the fish and stresses the technologies and innovations it uses against the sea lice. But there are other threats that come from rising sea temperatures. Jellyfish thrive in warmer waters, and they can both sting the salmon and block their gills. Across Europe and the world, rising sea temperatures in 2023 tested marine ecosystems and aquaculture.
Any sudden big rise that gets beyond what the animals are used to can cause stress to the point where they will die. We could see mass mortality of aquaculture, whether they be fish or shellfish.
Salmon is one of the UK's top exports, but this year around a quarter of farm salmon perished. And whilst innovative solutions are being explored, the global challenge of increasing sea temperatures will continue to affect both those who farm and fish and the marine life they oversee.
Counting down to the end of a 7-year mission.
Touchdown.
Celebrations in the control room.
And touchdown of the OSIRIS-REx.
As 250 grams of space dust gathered over 6 billion kilometers away on the Bennu asteroid is safely delivered to Utah. Its cargo may help answer key questions about life on Earth.
The key objective for me, and one of the driving objectives of this program, is to try to understand, did carbon-rich asteroids like Bennu deliver the compounds that may have led to the origin of life on our planet, the origin of Earth as a habitable world? And so we don't want biological organisms interacting with this, so we plan to exclude it from any contact with bacteria or anything else that might compromise our scientific investigation.
In a tweet on X, NASA declared the expedition would take scientists 4.5 billion years back in time. But that journey all hinged on a lengthy return mission into space, lifting off in 2016, reaching Bennu in 2018, and starting harvesting samples in 2020. Only then could the capsule begin its long journey down to Earth.